So just press start.
What's the first thing we're supposed to do?
Introduce and start.
I'll let
We
you.
have 5 minutes.
no,
So who
fine.
wants
Yeah.
to start? So
You're
who
gonna go
wants to
first.
Me?
Yes.
Or shall
Sure?
we,
Yes.
say?
Shall we toss a coin?
We should toss a coin.
Yeah, it's fair.
Toss a coin.
Yeah.
We have a coin.
So I think the person who answers is like
What are you,
has a
5?
bit of an advantage.
Heads. Tails.
Tails.
Call it in the air.
Tails.
You call tails, you heard him? Calls heads. You may go first.
What? Yep.
You ready?
Um,
And start.
So Star Trek is a massive media franchise that started in 1966 and is still going strong today, with a total of 727 hours spanning across 13 films and 6 television series. Star Trek is not only a science fiction action adventure, but is a commentary on our society and its future. It's philosophical, thoughtful, provocative, and at the time controversial. In the 60s, the original series was way ahead of its time, touching on subjects such as equality, race, language, education, religion, morality, philosophy, and even environmentalism. It's recognized as having progressive civil rights stances, so much so that Martin Luther King himself was a huge fan of the series. It might be old, but its messages are universal and stand the test of time. Being a TV series, it explores its worlds and characters in much greater depth than any film series ever could, by taking the viewer along countless adventures, each of them having their own stories, messages, and ideas. It has a diverse cast, an array of different characters, and tons of alien species and worlds. Its captains, especially Kirk and Picard, are regarded as being some of the best characters ever. It's also a story about friendship, delving into the dynamics between characters, their relationships, and behaviors. Moreover, it's incredibly fun to watch and has inspired literally multiple generations of people, creating a massive subculture. It checks the boxes of being both a great form of entertainment and something that enriches your view of the world. Star Trek is a franchise that is made for adults and which shows great substance and caliber. The Star Wars film series currently has 8 films, and only 3 of them are worth anyone's time. Episode 1, 2, and 3, also known as the prequels, were poorly received by critics, audiences, and even Star Wars fans themselves. They tainted the saga, and there's no way of shying away from the fact. Their biggest sin was that of having a muddled story, overuse of early day CGI, and ruining the character of Darth Vader. From a menacing and mysterious figure in the original trilogy, he is revealed to be a short-tempered and whiny teenager led by one of the worst on-screen performances of all time. The "I hate sand" scene has become iconic for its bad acting and ridiculousness. All 3 films were a mess, and George Lucas was so angry at the fans' complaints that he went to the lengths of announcing a Star Wars TV series with the sole purpose of ruining the canon as a form of revenge. This goes to show how much even Star Wars fans themselves hate them. In fact, the prequels are often shamefully ignored or disregarded when it comes to discussing the series. The original trilogy isn't short of any negative points. It's a family-friendly, paint-by-numbers blockbuster. Its story is as wide as an ocean, but as shallow as a puddle. It's the usual hero's journey story with characters which are basically cardboard cutout archetypes. The protagonist, Luke Skywalker, is the classic unremarkable good guy hero. Obi-Wan and Yoda are the mentors whose only purpose is to deliver exposition. Darth Vader is a cliché big bad guy whose plan is just to conquer everything in sight. There's no nuance or originality to them. The characters in Star Trek have unique personalities and views of the world, which heavily affect their behavior towards situations and other characters. Each captain and crew member is vastly different from one another, from both a moral and behavioral standpoint. The Star Wars films were praised for their special effects, but got ruined by being re-released as special editions that substituted the effects with horrible CGI. To this day, it's hard to find a copy of the original theatrical released versions. I'll grant you that they are good films, but there's really nothing that makes them special other than their novelty and nostalgia factors. The first 2 films of the original trilogy are okay, but the third one is generally regarded as being a step down. The major complaint is the introduction of an alien species, which are essentially a primitive race of teddy bears armed with sticks, who somehow managed to defeat a highly advanced galactic empire. Regarding the most recent films, The Force Awakens is basically a remake of the first film. It has the same plot elements, characters, and story structure. The filmmakers seem to have taken a lazy and safe approach, attempting to please fans and newcomers by using a story that has already been proven to be successful. The film is not bad, but without the Star Wars label, it would have been just another blockbuster. The latest film, Rogue One, is a lifeless and uneven spin-off that also benefits solely by being part of the franchise. It contains plot elements and scenes that go nowhere. The first half is messy, the characters are forgettable, with a protagonist who is a rebel but who never rebels at any point. And the filmmakers seem to have jammed 90% of the film's budget into the last 30 minutes to make people leave the theater happy. Star Wars might be the most popular of the two, but has none of the depth, substance, caliber, or timelessness of Star Trek. It has become a mass media corporate package that is now going to be stretched and milked to death by Disney.
That's it?
Yeah.
That's what you got?
Yeah.
All right.
Here.
I'll get something for notes.
Why Star Wars is superior to Star Trek? Well, to begin with, Star Wars is a fantastic epic set in space. It has queens, princesses, rogues, evil wizards, fantastic beasts, and even brave knights. It is a story about good versus evil. It's a story about a hero's journey of discovery and how the small but righteous will always be triumphant over the cruel and unjust. Okay? Star Trek is a dystopic outlook on humanity's future. The utopian ideal of the Federation is just a cover for what can be only described as a tyrannical military government that controls foreign powers through obvious acts of veiled intimidation and promises of technological prosperity and protection from barbarous hordes. They can be likened to the Roman Empire, and clear parallels can be drawn. Humanity's future is to be a cog in the military order or to be relegated to be a second-class citizen subservient to the Federation. In fact, the Federation, the protagonists of your story, is not much better than the Galactic Empire, the antagonists of mine. Both are military governments, and they both veil themselves in the illusion that they are, in fact, representative democracies. Star Wars films have been nominated for Best Screenplay. Okay? Star Trek has never been nominated in the entire run of the franchise in all its forms. Not once for Best Storyline. Better special effects. Star Trek may have been groundbreaking for television, but when you compare an episode of the original Star Trek series to film, or produced at or around the same time, you can see that the special effects were bad, even by those standards back then. Clear examples being Fantastic Voyage, 1966, 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. That movie was so good they thought he had clearly faked the moon landing. Barbarella, 1968, personal favorite of mine, and of course, Planet of the Apes. Star Wars: A New Hope won an Academy Award for Best Special Effects. Other films in the series have been nominated as well. Star Trek has never earned an Oscar for anything except for hair and makeup, and that was in 2010. 1980s Star Trek, the motion picture, received nothing but some token nominations. Superior music. John Williams crafted some of the most identifiable and iconic original film scores ever, and he's been working on Star Wars films since 1977. The Star Wars theme or Imperial March are instantly recognizable tunes. We all know them. Da 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 da. But I challenge you, anyone in this classroom, to just hum for me the works of Jerry Goldsmith or James Horner. These are easily forgotten, and I challenge you to produce one for me right now. Better protagonists, Luke and Lando. The Star Wars series focused primarily on the Skywalker family and their trials and tribulations. Our first introduction to a member of this prodigiously important family is Luke on the desert planet Tatooine. Coming from a seemingly simplistic and uninteresting background, Luke discovers he is anything but, and that his father was a member of the Mystic Order of Jedi Knights. Luke then goes on a daring rescue with his mentor, Obi-Wan, to rescue a princess and destroy a Death Star. Despite being only a supporting character, Lando Calrissian is a hero of the rebellion as well. He saved Han Solo's life on Tatooine and even flew the Millennium Falcon into the belly of the second Death Star so he could daringly launch a concussion missile into his power core. He was born a scoundrel like Han Solo, but through his own hero's journey, transformed into a savior. The better antagonists, the Emperor and the Galactic Empire. The Emperor Palpatine was a Sith Lord, and as such, was symbolic of all that is corrupt and evil. He was the greatest threat to the galaxy because he desired nothing but unlimited power, plotting and scheming to rot the Republic from within like a worm that penetrated the apple. His manipulatively megalomaniacal nature had him maneuvering people like chess pieces, sacrificing them if need be to neutralize anything that poses a threat to him or his new order. It is the Emperor's plans for the Galactic Empire that brought him the liquidation of the Galactic Senate and the secret construction of the Death Star that destroyed Alderaan. The greatest threat to the Federation is the Borg, the Romulans, or the Klingons. A military order, at best, easily defeated through acts of attrition.
Okay, so when you're done, you have the next 5 minutes.
So now this is his chance to rebuttal.
Yeah. And then after this set, you have questions.
Okay. You ready? Chunk.
Okay. So when it comes to like the conflicts, which at the end of the day they come out to, it comes down to what the film or the series shows as being good or bad. So my argument is that in the Star Trek series, the moral, ethical problems are confronted. They're more realistic and they have more to do with today's society. The morality in Star Wars is outdated and ancient, and it comes from like Homeric stories, like mythological stories, like the hero, there's the big bad guy, and there's a disregard for like common people. For example, at the end of the third film in the original series, Luke Skywalker kills Palpatine. The act of Luke Skywalker killing Palpatine, supposedly following the film's morality, would turn to the dark side, even if he would save millions of lives by doing so. Anakin Skywalker, who's Darth Vader, somehow the film makes him look like a hero at the end of Return of the Jedi for saving his son's life, even though he's committed countless atrocities in the past. Somehow he's redeemed just by saving the life of one person. And also the death of all the minions, like the stormtroopers, is completely unimportant and glossed over. And the only thing important in the series is personal drama of the main characters. While in Star Trek, they always count every single death. They try not to kill anyone. They try not to interfere with species, and they just try to be passive in their actions of exploring the universe. Also, in The Phantom Menace, George Lucas wants us to empathize with Anakin Skywalker, who is Darth Vader, spoilers again. But even though we all know that he's gonna grow up and kill the equivalent of the population of Earth multiple times. Yoda at one point in The Empire Strikes Back, he says this sentence: fear makes you angry and anger makes you evil, which wrongly implies that even if you get angry at injustice or murder, you will automatically become evil and your moral compass will be reversed. This makes it very centric to the heroes and to the antagonists, and is very outdated. In Star Trek, the original series, there are virtues which are Aristotelian, and they have a virtue called the prima facie, which is correct until proven otherwise. And the three main characters, they represent spirit, reason, and irrational desires. In the Next Generation, the values are Aristotelian, Kantian, and have existential sensibilities. Deep Space Nine is a bit more kind of about reason and religion and terrorism. And Voyager has an amalgamation of Aristotelian and Platonic virtues while dealing with what we call a leap of faith. So there are moral conflicts that are more genuine and people can relate to better than just what Star Wars has to offer. Now let me go to why the Star Trek films, the new Star Trek films are better than the new Star Wars films. So Star Trek, the normal one, the first one, Into Darkness and Beyond, they kind of push the limit of Star Trek. They remain faithful while exploring new things. While the new Star Wars films, they just retread already seen territory. For example, almost every single film in the Star Wars film is about the Death Star, even the new ones, both of them. And it seems like the same story again and again. And also the villains in Star Trek are scarier, more ruthless, and they have a richer backstory. The Force Awakens is a complete rehash of The New Hope. If you go online, you can find point by point. Even the scenes are almost in the same order. The villain in The Force Awakens isn't scary and has no depth. He's just someone's son, and you're supposed to think that's enough to give him depth. And the villain in Rogue One is just a cliche evil general, a bit like Darth Vader. He's just this big bad guy, and you don't know much about him. Okay, so Star Wars: A New Hope. It has the tired premise of the boy with special gifts, and it has the tired plot point, which is save the princess. The character of Han Solo is arrogant; he doesn't care about what's happening. C-3PO and R2-D2, if you go back, they're quite annoying character, comic relief, and they're not even that funny. And there's that awkward scene with Obi-Wan Kenobi where he dies and disappears very awkwardly, just this weird effect. And then there's that whole story about the spaceship the size of a moon having a weak spot where one shot will blow the whole thing up, which they shamefully tried to fill in that gap in the new film. And the funny thing is also, like Luke Skywalker, he goes from being a poor farmer to a Jedi Master in what seems like 20 minutes. And all the plot is then, from that point, continues to be recycled by the other films.
All right. You said that Martin Luther King was a fan of Star Trek. We know who was a fan of Star Wars? Ronald Reagan. All right? Star Trek films are worth watching while Star Wars films aren't. Dude, Journey Home was terrible. They had to rescue whales. All right? They had to go back in time to rescue whales because they found out in the future there was an alien species that only spoke whale. That's a plot of a movie, ladies and gentlemen. Return of the Jedi was fantastic. It was groundbreaking. It was the birth of the 1980s blockbuster. Ewoks defeat the Galactic Empire. Do you have a problem with that? This small teddy bear creature fighting with a spear against a superior number, against a more technologically advanced enemy? Dude, check your history books. It's called the Revolutionary War and Vietnam, all right? Morally ethical issues. Star Trek is jumping down and fighting against morally ethical issues. How about homosexuality? Drug use? They never touch on any of these concepts. They pick and choose what is PC, what is societally acceptable to talk about. And they are a bit preachy about it, I admit. Don't get me wrong, Star Trek's a perfectly good series. I'm just trying to emphasize to you that Star Wars is clearly superior. And I'll explain a little bit better. Darth Vader, you spoke about him. He is the Emperor's right-hand man. And a Sith Lord, he doesn't just go around killing millions of people. He is a scalpel, my friend. He single-handedly dismantled the Jedi Order and brought about the imbalance to the Force. He wields a lightsaber with deadly efficiency. He can absorb blaster rifles with his hands. And he can force choke someone through a video chat. If that's not a compelling villain, I don't know what is. He was corrupted by the Emperor, his mind, his spirit, and through tragic incident lost most of his humanity when his body was savaged beyond repair, his flesh replaced with machine. He is a shell of what he once was. Jabba the Hutt. Now, if you really look at the villains of the story, we have Jabba the Hutt, we have Boba Fett, we have the Emperor, we have Vader. All the villains in the story are always guilty of one or more of the deadly sins. Jabba, he's guilty of sloth, gluttony, greed, lust, envy, pride, and wrath. That's a hell of a good villain. The guy is disgusting. Boba Fett, don't even need to go there. Cooler technology. Star Trek has photon torpedoes, holograms, transporters, replicators, warp drives. Star Wars has blasters, concussion missiles, thermal detonators, lightsabers, speeder bikes, cloud cars, hyperdrive, clone and droid armies. Cooler technology. What is cooler than a lightsaber? Lightsabers are symbols of the Jedi Order and the greatest weapon in cinematic history. Nothing compares to a weapon that can cut off your arm and cauterize the wound at the same time. Better aliens. The alien designs for Star Wars utilize practical effects, makeup, and an army of puppeteers. Fantastic alien beasts were portrayed through painstakingly slow filming processes like stop-motion animation. The majority of alien species on Star Trek utilize humans with minimalistic prosthetics or makeup, sometimes things as small as ear extensions, colorful wigs, nose ridges, or facial hair. Are we supposed to believe that an entire race of aliens that developed light years away on the planet Vulcan only have one obvious physical difference, and that's pointed ears? Oh, I'm sorry, they have purple blood too, but we don't get to see that, do we? Because that would be normal. Ewoks and Wookiees. Who can forget the Ewoks and the Wookiees? These are seemingly cuddly but deadly alien species that are absolutely unforgettable. They are a warrior culture. They are ruled by honor. Okay? The producers of Star Trek put a horn on a dog. It was a unicorn dog. R2-D2 didn't even really get... The living force. Living force is an idea that all living things in the universe are connected and that there are force-sensitive individuals who can use their connection to do what can only be described as magic. The closest thing Star Trek has to the living force is the Q Continuum, an organization of beings with supernatural abilities that make them able to manipulate space and time at their will.
Okay, so questions and answers now.
Questions and answers from...
From each other, right?
How much time do we have?
No.
You're just gonna say stop at one point? Okay.
So you can ask him a question and you can ask him a question.
Who starts?
And then after, when you're done, you can ask you a question.
Okay, I'll ask the first question.
Mm-hmm.
You should James first.
Oh, James starts.
Because
Okay.
he's first.
I start?
Yeah.
Okay, how can you defend the prequels?
How can I defend the prequels?
Yeah, seeing that Star Wars, you have to see it as a whole. So you can't really leave them out. And they form, like, up till recently, they form 50% of the series.
How can you defend Journey Home?
You have to answer. Can't answer another question. Okay, I can answer that after.
The prequels, I can defend them like this. The prequels, despite the way you and I feel about them and how that they didn't live up to our expectations, is very simple. All right? People like them. You don't like them. I don't like them. But that's because I'm comparing them to something that was amazing. All right? Sometimes it's hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice. Alien was an amazing film. 1979. It was an amazing film. This sequel, Aliens, was arguably better. But every film that came out after that was terrible. Even Alien Covenant, a prequel. Okay? Sometimes you just can't capture lightning in a bottle twice. And I think the prequels are good overall because they give more completion to the story and they make the universe that much more dynamic and unique. My question to you, who's got the better toys? Star Trek or Star Wars?
You want me to answer that?
I want you to answer. Who has the better toys?
I think it's irrelevant.
You think toys are irrelevant?
Yes.
I can't even have a conversation with this guy. Toys are irrelevant.
Yeah.
Toys are a mass marketing device that indoctrinates the next generation into the interest and fanaticism that is the franchise IP.
Okay, do you want me to answer why?
I want you to answer why are
because I think here we're comparing the media kind of franchise.
No, we're comparing the IP.
Not really. I mean, okay. There are toys of Star Trek, okay? Mm-hmm. So if you really want toys, you can find them. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just like an optional extra. And anyway, there are 3D printers today, so if you want the model, you can just print one.
With my 3D printer, okay? Shoot a question to me, my man.
Okay, so the character of Anakin Skywalker, and the way he turns into Darth Vader. How can you look at Darth Vader in the same way after watching the prequels and seeing that he's just like a whiny kid?
What were you like at 9 years old? What was any of us like?
He was an adult when he turned into Darth Vader.
I guarantee you that when we were all 9, we were really whiny and annoying.
Can you repeat the question, please?
How can you defend Darth Vader being a badass when the prequels make him such a whiny little bitch? Did I paraphrase correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. Dude, when you were 9, you weren't a really cool kid, I guarantee it.
He was an adult.
Okay, and then when he was a teenager, yes, he had developed some whiny behaviors. But you know what? That's very much a teenager thing, man. I don't know how long it's been since you've been a teenager.
He goes from being a Jedi to killing kids in like 5 minutes.
He goes from being that's what you're you're inferring the film's timeline. Years go by between the events of episode 1 and episode 2. They had to make an entire TV series just to bridge the time called Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I'm sorry, Star Wars: The Clone Wars came out for episode 2. So as far as that, I mean, I don't know really what you want me to tell you. It's like he evolved as a person, just like any of us do. He was battling ideas of love, personal reflection of where's my place in the universe. Okay, very existential crisis kind of stuff, man. You know, when you're a teenager, especially when you were taken from your mother, raised as a slave as a child, you typically probably have some emotional issues. And then he kept having nightmares about his mother being murdered. And let's remember, he murdered children that were the children of the men who murdered his mother. I mean, it's a bit of revenge. It's a little over the top. My question, I ask you. Does your series have a religion? Because in 2010, over 100,000 Americans listed their religion as Jedi.
First of all, that's quite dumb, and that's more like cringeworthy than something to be proud of, to be honest. And one other thing, at least Star Trek fans have a name. They're called the Trekkies. What do you call a Star Wars fan? Like I'm just a Star Wars fan. Like at least the Trekkies is kind of, they have more of an identity of like being these people who grew up, this generation that grew up with the series, and they still hold it very dear to their hearts.
You know who else had an identity? Nazis.
So, I mean, okay, fair enough.
They had a name called them by.
Even like pacifists have a name, so I don't see the point. What's the next question?
That was my question, so it's your question.
That's it? Okay. So you're saying that the prequels are good. So the first film is full of like Senate meetings, talks of trade routes, and Jar Jar Binks, who the actor himself said it was a painful experience. How can you defend that film?
It's still not been proven that Jar Jar Binks is not a Sith Lord himself, which would then be the greatest plot underlying hook ever.
But it isn't.
But it's not been canonized, but there's so much speculation that it's really within the realm of possibilities. There's more evidence that Jar Jar is a Sith Lord than we didn't land on the moon.
Okay, I think you were dodging the question, but
I'm not dodging the question. What I'm saying is, what was the question?
How can you defend The Phantom Menace, a film full of like talks about taxation, Senate meetings, trade routes, and the toilet humor of Jar Jar Binks and
Darth
Maul
Maul
acting?
Darth Maul has 2 lightsabers.
Okay. Darth Maul, the guy like with no depth, and he's barely in the film.
Barely in the film?
Yeah.
He's like the chief antagonist.
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole problem. He's the chief antagonist and he's barely in it. So he's like...
You know, there's a little film called Seven, where Kevin Spacey's only in the last 5 minutes of the film, and it's one of the greatest...
Yeah. Well, that's a mystery film. It's all about whodunit. So like every like murder mystery, the bad guy's in the end, and the conflict is more between like finding him than actually being him as a physical opponent. But in the Phantom Menace, he just shows up at the end.
That's why the name's the Phantom Menace.
They have this really painfully bad choreography scene where if you watch on YouTube, there's a video of them just jumping around like dancers, and every occasion that one of them has to hit him, they don't take it and they just do a spin or something.
Besides, it was also the first time we got to see Jedis operating as Jedis. Okay? You got to see a Jedi Knight operating, a fully trained Jedi Knight operating as a Jedi Knight should. Like you said, Anakin or Luke Skywalker received a crash course training, and it took him years before he had truly unlocked all of his powers. Okay? But the Jedi Knights of the Phantom Menace, those were full-fledged Jedi Masters. Okay? They were badasses. Okay, they had the ability to force command people, force jump, force speed, all that good stuff. It was a great series. It was great.
Fine. Who asked? You want to ask?
Do you, by any chance, are you aware of the most valuable piece of memorabilia ever to be auctioned for Star Trek? Well, I do, because I did a little bit of research.
It's the last thing I will research.
Carrie Fisher's iconic slave girl costume from 1983 Star Wars The Return of the Jedi sold in 2015 for $96,000, despite the costume appearing on screen for less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes! She's in this on screen wearing it. The most expensive item sold at this particular auction was Leia's blockade runner, seen in a short 1-minute sequence in the beginning of the Star Wars A New Hope from 1977. The spacecraft sold for a whopping $450,000. The most expensive Star Trek item ever auctioned, by point of comparison, was Captain Kirk's original chair from aboard the Enterprise. The chair had been used throughout the entire original Star Trek series, 79 episodes, and sold for only $304,000 and $700 in 2002. Evidence that fans of Star Wars have considerably more disposable income, which makes them a better class of people anyway.
That wasn't even a question. You just stole 2 minutes.
What do you think of that?
I think it's
There's the
irrelevant.
question.
I think it's irrelevant. It just shows like a certain fandom behind it, but it doesn't necessarily mean if it's good or bad. Like there are films that are like almost, or series that are like almost unknown, but they're better than like popular ones. So I think popularity is kind of in the background. It's not that important when it comes to what is like objectively better. That's my answer.
Okay. I think everything we've talked about is objective. So, I mean, do you have another question for me, or
Not
because I
really.
have no more questions for you?
I can make something up, but at the
You can just
moment.
make something up.
What's
in the box? Make something up.
No, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a question. It would
All
be
right.
just like answering.
Thank you very much.
I think we haven't finished.
Oh, we're not done.
No.
So questions from the audience?
Questions from the audience.
Don't you think Star Trek is in a way superior due to it having its own language?
What do you mean? His own language?
Has its own, what's it called?
Klingon.
Klingon.
Klingon, Ferengi, yeah, that has his own language. So does Star Wars. Jabba has a language. The Wookiees have a language.
Yeah, but it's actually defined.
Well, how many people speak Klingon?
A lot of people.
A lot of people.
Well,
What's our definition of a lot? Like,
Well, I can't say because I haven't done my research. I just know
Well, since you talked about the auction, can I just use 30 seconds to answer the
Of
couple
course.
points? You mind? Okay, so you talked about special effects. Number one, the TV series budget is lower, and the original series came out before Star Wars. And all the films you listed that said they have better effects than Star Trek came out even before Star Wars, and they arguably have better effects than that. And also about the makeup of the people who grew up, like of this alien species that developed like light years away from Earth.
sure.
It's explained in Star Trek that all these species that look like humans, they look like that because they come from the same genetic origin.
Mhm.
So they
Okay.
just had slight differences.
But do you believe that bullshit?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
That's it.
How about this for let's take the TV series out of it and let's talk about films for a second. Star Wars came out in 1977. Star Trek, the movie, which had already had a fan base for about 15 years at this point, came out with a film in what, 1979, 1980? Am I correct? So 2-3 years after Star Wars. So you already had an audience, an American audience who was into sci-fi. They had proven it with Star Trek, with Star Wars. There was an audience for sci-fi. Star Trek, the movie, came out in 1980, years after Star Wars. So you should have been able to benefit from all the advances in technology. You should have had a Hollywood budget. But your film garnered no technical breakthroughs, no dramatic interest in booting the franchise indefinitely. I don't quite understand. Like, I mean, your comparison is flawed because that film came after Star Wars and didn't get any of the critical acclaim.
Okay. Quick response. I think when we're talking about Star Trek, we have to focus on the series. The films themselves, I haven't seen a lot of them, but from what I heard, like it's kind of 50-50 between good and bad. And anyway, what I'm concentrating on is the series, because that's at the end of the day, that's the heart of where Star Trek is. And the movies are kind of like these spin-off additions, you could say. And at the time, the series was groundbreaking, and even the next generation was. So I think a more fair comparison would be to the series and the films. They are what they are. I mean, they are good and bad. Like in Star Wars, they are good and bad. At least from my point of view.
Any more questions? No?
Questions from you?
I'm nervous either.
What's going on?
So 1 minute conclusion.
Okay, thank you.
1
1
minute.
minute, yeah.
Final conclusions?
So just break, start.
Yeah,
James,
this is-
you go first. If you want to
Um,
have a few seconds to.
no, I have written down.
Ready?
Yeah. Right. When we're talking about the merits of Star Wars, we're really just talking about the 3 films that form the original trilogy. The prequels are widely regarded as being not only vastly inferior, but bad films. The 2 new entries are nothing special and lose themselves in the sea of action blockbuster we get each year. They are simply unremarkable and suffer from their very own unique problems as well. The originals are held up by their nostalgia factor, their novelty at the time, and use of innovative special effects. All things considered, they are a product of their time. The story is cliché, using elements and plot points that we've seen a million times by now. The special effects are outdated and got ruined by the release of special editions that turned the practical effects into poorly early-day CGI reconstructions. To those who grew up watching it, I completely understand and accept the fact that you might love the films. When it comes to breaking down their filmmaking and storytelling, they aren't really that special, and there's much better out there. Star Trek is memorable, rich, and sophisticated. Its iconic captains have left their mark as some of the best characters put on screen. Its story world is so deep and rich that Star Wars can't compare. The modern films move away from the philosophical approach of the series, but are solid action adventures in their own right. That's quick.
Okay.
So you have 1 minute.
All right. Star Wars is superior to Star Trek in regards to the franchise. We can sit here and talk about TV series, films being extension of the series. Okay, we're talking about an IP. Okay, we are talking about an intellectual property. So, is the intellectual property that goes, and that's everything. All the books, magazines, cartoons, comic books, television shows. Is that, for Star Trek, better than Star Wars? Toys, t-shirts, films, television shows, Christmas specials! Is it better? I don't personally believe so. Because that classic argument of good versus evil, this idea of religion, this idea that the small can overcome the good.
So anticlimactic.
Come on, these two just.
But
I thought it was 2 minutes though. That's what I wrote down.
that,
We had
Finish this
some-
outside. Huh?
We had some component.
Finish it outside.
finish it outside. I'll meet you by where the flagpole used to be.
I'm gonna put you on
Whatever
it.
happened to our flagpole? It just disappeared one day. It's like, no more flagpole. All right, thank you very much. You are indeed a master debater.